Now, before we go into Europe, it's important to again announce. Please hit subscribe, hit like, share. Now's the time to do it. Get it out there. And now that we've covered that base, once again, we can turn into Europe data points. Now, these are shows that don't get as much love as I as I wish, just because Europe is still a huge It's very important for the U.S. economy, and really, what are we looking at? Because Europe has been about 3 to 4 weeks ahead of us in terms of virus spreads, some of the issues that we've seen overall. And there's no different here. So the bigger, this is just kind of a summary of things that we've seen. And we'll pick out certain ones and go deeper into them. But the biggest piece is the manufacturing side. So manufacturing continues to be fairly either robust, and by robust I mean in terms of against estimates and or just in expansionary territory. So like France, estimate was 51, actual 51. Germany, estimates were 55, came in at 58. Eurozone overall, estimates were for 53, came in at 54.4. So clearly there remains that manufacturing side that we keep talking about. The issue is services. So services keep missing to the downside, where France missed. Its estimates were for 47, came in at 46.5. Germany was for 49.4, came in at 48.9. Eurozone overall, estimates were for 47, came in at 46.2. So this pulls the composite down below 50 pretty much across all of the countries, except obviously Germany, with the composite being still in expansionary territory. This is just showing the headwinds, where it's the bifurcation in terms of that activity that we keep talking about. And the manufacturing is now starting to roll over as we see pressure mounting in just exports and just economic activity as COVID cases continue to rise, specifically in those three countries, where Germany has now announced Merkel was able to get a 1 month partial lockdown. France could announce it as early as Thursday. And the other issue is we have road activity, where road activity is down anywhere from 10 to 20% week over week, in year over year, which is obvious, but even week over week is down again in Europe, which is just showing that the activity is just going to be under pressure overall. And then when we look at just the government debt as a percentage of GDP, it keeps shifting higher. And this is only going to get worse as you get more lockdowns, which is just going to decrease revenue and just economic activity, which naturally just reduces your GDP, and stimulus spending that continues to roll out not only at the ECB but at the government level, which is why these numbers are only going to get worse as we go through Q4. And as we keep talking about, debt is deflationary. There remains just inherent headwinds for just trying to spur economic activity, which is just slow and not willing to come around. And this, again, coming full circle to, again, we talked about the government. Now let's look at the ECB. The ECB will continue to expand. Now, this is the forecast as we go through 2023 and beyond. And you can see that the expansion is only going to increase over well through 2022. I mean, 5 trillion euro. Just continues to expand. If you want to convert that into dollars based on where we are, we're talking about 7.5 on our way to 8 trillion. And the pressure just is going to continue as they try to stimulate inflation, try to get prices up, and try to just stimulate the economy that continues to be an issue overall. And we can see it started, but it's been pretty consistent straight through 2015. And it's public debt, it's asset-backed, and it's corporate bonds. Corporate bonds and the covered bonds are the ones that are continuing to see this increase, as well as just public debt. So if you look at Italy, can Italy just issue debt and then sell it to the ECB? Well, the answer is yes. And so these are issues that we're going to continue to see of the overall exposure at the ECB level as these economies and just everything continues to kind of fall sideways and then actually start to weaken. Now, when we look at the expectations versus the real GDP year over year, this is what we keep talking about with expectations really trying to slow down and really seeing this pressure overall, where expectations were for Y, but then the German real GDP year over year. So when we look at expectations are starting to slow down, they're still strong, they're still above zero, but they're starting to roll over. we think that there's going to be, again, that pressure as we head into Q4 of what does Q4 GDP look like. And Germany is just one that we talk about the most out of Europe, not only because it's the largest economy in Europe, but it also has a very robust export market. So it's also a much bigger indicator of what does the export market look like? What does the global trade market look like? Is it something that is just unique to Europe, or are we seeing something similar in South Korea, Singapore, China, and Japan? And this is some of those things that we're starting to factor in, and these setbacks continue to go through the system, especially with a renewed lockdown in Germany, which is just going to put pressure on the overall economy. Now, when we look at trade momentum, there's two different ways to look at it. This is one that's looking backwards a bit, and we just wanted to highlight how we did have a big resurgence over that 3-month change. It has slowed down, specifically in a lot of different areas, including the U.S., South Korea, Japan, and Germany. But again, it deserves repeating. It did get better. And that's why we did see Fujairah draw down. We did see distillate start coming out of the market. So these are things that we started to see some of this normalization and again, as we keep talking about inventories had to pick up. We had to see that increase in inventories because everybody was so short on these at-time deliveries, which is what a lot of this picks up. Now, as we go forward, this is going to contract. It's still going to be expansionary, but it just won't be to the same level, especially when we look at those 3-month averages. And when we look at just these German data points, we just want to look at consumer confidence. So the estimate was for -3, came in at -3.1. For a German business climate, the estimate was for 93, came in at 92.7. For the German business expectations, the estimate was for 96.5, came in at 95. In current assessment, it came in at 89. The estimates were 89.8, came in at 90.3. So you can kind of see that we're right around some of these estimates, and some of the confidence is getting a little bit worse. Some of the climate is fairly stable. And this is why we keep talking about, and we mentioned it in the USA part. We're at a pivot point. We're either going to kind of pivot up or pivot down. I don't think we're really going to go all that too far sideways. And as some of the economic data continues to worsen and we get COVID cases and hospitalizations increasing, this is going to start to roll to the downside. Now, it's something that'll be temporary. We'll start to see some of this recovery as we go into 2021. But this is why we think there's going to be a continuous pressure as we look at what is happening in Germany, what is happening in Europe, and then what does that mean going forward as Europe headwinds just continue to persist, which is just going to leave more refined products in storage, more oil in storage, less demand overall, which is just going to be impactful, especially as we see loadings increasing out of Norway, out of the North Sea are fairly stable, and Libyan crude continues to rally. It's where is it going to go? It's not going to go into Europe. It's going to have to compete in a broader market. And these are why some of these data points is just going to be a problem, especially when we look at U.S. trade. How can we trade there? And it's just, again, our distillate exports and exports in general will be under pressure. And now we can talk a little bit in the next segment about India, China, and what does this mean? Or, because we talked about Europe, well, what is happening in Asia, and can Asia really pick us up? Short answer is no, but let's go through kind of why we think that.